Welcome to episode 20 of the Tax Professionals podcast. You're tax qualified, but what's next? How to stay on a continuous path of progression after qualifying.
Welcome to the Tax Professionals podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping you improve your tax career. Here's your host, Jack Bonehill.
Have you recently become tax qualified? If you have, massive congratulations, whether it's ADIT, CTA or some other tax related qualification. It's a great achievement and massive weight off your shoulders. Before I started working in tax, my goal was to become CTA qualified, and I remember feeling so relieved once I was. Felt like I finally had my personal life back. No more studying after work, on weekends, or having to lose a day out of my Centre Parks holiday because my one exam fell right in the middle of it. That did actually happen. Anyway, I was full of enthusiasm and wanted to continue progressing my career, but after qualifying I did actually feel a little bit lost, a bit without direction, and I found it difficult. Before qualifying I knew what I was working towards, exactly what I needed to do, which was pass the exams, but all of a sudden that was no more and I just didn't know where to focus my attention next. I had very supportive colleagues which helped me a bunch, but ultimately it was down to me and me alone to determine what was next in my career journey. There were so many options which was slightly overwhelming and wasn't helped by the fact I really wanted to make the correct choice. I was able to regain my focus, get direction and get back on track with developing my career, and since qualifying I've had 2 promotions in around 18 months. So, in this episode I'd like to share with you what I learned from this experience to help prevent you having to go through the same thing that I did, and to help you come out of the other side of qualifying with direction, energy and motivation to continue developing and reach your next career milestone. Without further ado, let's get to it. If you want to come out of just passing and qualifying as a tax professional, I think one of the most important things you should do after qualifying is to have a sit down, have a think about exactly what you want to get out of your career. What values do you have that need to align with your career, and what goals do you want to achieve? How far do you want to go? Thinking about all of these things will help you to decide on what is the right direction for you to take your career in, and it will also make sure that you can choose something that is actually aligned with the goals and values that you have in relation to your career. Some of the areas that you can think about when trying to figure out exactly what your values and goals are in relation to your career are like what work-life balance do you want? Are you happy with working long hours every day of the week, maybe even on weekends, or do you want to have a balance where you can pretty much only work your 9 till 5, say? If that's important to you, then you need to make sure that you're aiming towards a job or taking your career in a direction where that's possible. How important is money to you? Have you got a specific amount in mind, or do you want to just see how much you can earn overall? Because obviously, in general at least, the more that you want to earn, the more hours you'll need to work and the specific jobs that you might want to think about. So if you're really bothered and it's important to you to want to earn a large yearly salary, then you might want to think about becoming a partner at some point in the future, or maybe a head of tax. And if money is less of interest to you and say the balance is instead, then you can choose a job according to that. What is your ambition as well? Because different jobs will be more difficult to get there to as an end goal, and how much time and effort are you willing to put in both inside and outside of work. So you should have a little think about that. And you really want to make sure that your ambitions kind of align with the work-life balance that you want and the money or the amount of money that you want to earn as well. Other things to think about potentially are what specialism are you going to work in? Are you going to work in corporation tax, employment taxes, or something else? Because after qualifying, that could be a point where you can finally choose your specialism, or you might get put down a certain route, and you'll want to make sure that whatever tax specialism that you go down is one that you enjoy and that you don't dislike. I just want to say though that there's no need to put a big amount of pressure on yourself to choose exactly what specialism that you go into, because there is the option to change your specialism later on in your career. And that might not be necessarily the most straightforward thing. If you've gained a lot of knowledge in a particular area of tax, it is possible. And the chances are once you become specialised in an area, you probably won't want to anyway. I know personally I had a bit of concern, I suppose, about becoming specialised too early on in my career, but actually in hindsight that was something that I probably shouldn't have been that worried about. Something else to think about is do you want to get a lot of enjoyment out of work? Because if that's important to you, then you need to think about what aspects of working in tax that you really like working in, and then think about what potential jobs out there could fit in and allow you to do those things that you enjoy a lot. And then obviously, of course, there's not going to be like definitive answers to many of these questions. So figuring out the blend that kind of seems to work right for you will not be an exact science, but having a think about all of these things will help you to figure out what type of tax jobs there are out there that will allow you to meet all those values and the goals that you want to have out of your career. So that's the first part. It's to have a think about what you want out of your career, particularly in terms of values and goals, straight after qualifying. That will help give you the direction to continue progressing and developing your career in a direction that is right for you. Once you've had a think about exactly what it is that you want to get out of your career, particularly in terms of values and goals, then you can think about the direction that you want to go in and make sure that this aligns with those values and goals that you've thought about from the last section. So I did touch upon specialisms a little bit in the last section, but I just want to go into a little bit more detail in relation to that, because I do think it's an area of a lot of worry and concern for people who are early on in their career. If you're really lucky, then you might get the chance to test out a lot of different areas early on in your career, but I don't think that's something that is an option or an opportunity for most people. So I actually specialise in employment taxes, for those of you that don't know, and I have always worked in employment taxes since I first started working in tax. But the thing is, when I was looking for tax jobs, employment tax wasn't really an area that I was particularly looking to work in. I mean, to be honest, I wasn't really sure what it was, and I didn't really get much information about it either, because there just doesn't seem to be much information out there about employment tax jobs. Corporation tax or VAT seem to be the big areas, along with personal tax as areas to go in and work in. So when I first started working in employment taxes, I wasn't really sure if it was an area that I wanted to work in long term, because I didn't know whether there would be a lot of career opportunities there. And I kind of had in the back of my mind that it was an area that might give me less opportunity overall in my career than, say, corporation tax, that seems to have a lot more doors open, or at least that was my perception at the time anyway. But in hindsight, it was a silly thing to worry about, really, because now I kind of appreciate and respect a specialism and see its importance and benefit to your career, and actually getting to become a specialised early on, I think, has greatly benefited me and helped me to progress quicker than what I otherwise might have done. So don't worry too much about your specialism, but as long as it's an area that you enjoy working in, then that's all that really matters, I think, in my opinion. If you do have a specialism in mind, though, that you really want to work in, then by all means go and chase that. But if you're not that bothered, then I would say more so go with the flow and kind of follow the opportunities that are put your way. Another thing to think about in terms of direction is what type of tax job that you want, because there's so many different types out there. There's what I would probably think of being the most obvious ones, which is working for an accountancy practice like one of the big four firms or similar firms to that. That could be an option for you, and within that you could usually, I suppose, become specialised down a compliance route or an advisory route, so that's something else you could be thinking about. Do you want to work in-house for a tax team rather than for a separate advisory practice? Because maybe that's just something that interests you more because you don't want to do timesheets, and maybe you want to work on only one company's tax affairs instead. And I think, generally speaking, actually working in-house, you'll get the opportunity to dabble in more than one area of tax. Other areas could be becoming a tax lecturer, like for one of the training providers out there, like Tolly's, Kaplan or BPP. Do you want to go and become some form of tax solicitor or tax barrister? Would you like to work for HMRC maybe? Would you like to start your own tax practice? Even when you have a specialism, you could kind of move more down a route of compliance or advisory, or maybe a mixture of both. So knowing what you want out of each of those will give you a good idea about the direction that you want to go in. And it's also okay to think that you want to try out a lot of these different types of jobs, I know that's certainly something that I want to do, and if an opportunity came up and I was interested in it, then I might consider taking it, even if it's in a completely different area to what I'm working in now. I think the beauty of it is, anyway, from working in tax, there's so many transferable skills that you actually learn that even if you've developed them really strongly for one particular job, the chances are it's going to be really useful and helpful for another job anyway. So even if you want to take a completely different swap later down the road, it doesn't really matter that much. And to kind of get more of an idea about which type of these jobs you would like the most, you can have a look at kind of available jobs, job adverts, and maybe even ask other people that work in a job that you think you might be interested in. So just speaking to other people, maybe that's people who work for your employer, maybe it's people that you're doing your studying with, or someone else in your network that works in tax. You can just talk to people to find out a bit more there. And as I say, really, I really do want to emphasise this point, because I kind of got bogged down on it a bit when I was thinking about kind of the direction to go in a few years ago. And it's okay to not know for 100% exactly what direction that you want to go in. I don't think anyone ever really does. And I do think as long as it's something that you're interested in and that you'll enjoy, and that it is an area you'd like to try out, you can just take the opportunities that come your way. But as long as you have an idea of those areas that you would like to have a go at, then that's okay. Having an idea as well will make coming up with relevant goals and objectives more easy than if you had no idea at all about the direction that you wanted to go in. Because that way you can set objectives and goals that will help you to get to that place where you want to be overall. But as I say, even if you decide to change your mind later on, that won't matter too much, because a lot of the skills and everything that you develop will still be useful and transferable to many other tax jobs. You just might need to work on some areas and develop them a bit further for a different type of tax job, but that's easily done. So once you've had a little think about exactly what you want out of your career in terms of the values and goals, and you've had a think about the direction that you want to take your career to, kind of the next step really to keep you motivated, engaged and energetic to kind of keep going with developing and progressing your career is to establish and set goals and objectives to help you to get where you want to be. As I've kind of said already, straight after qualifying for me was a time where I felt a little bit lost, because I didn't really kind of know what direction to go in. I didn't know where I wanted to specialise. I knew I was enjoying my current role with my current employer, and that was about it, to be honest. And I didn't really set myself any personal goals and objectives straight after qualifying, so I didn't really have anything to work towards. So it really is worth spending time to think about what goals and objectives you might want, because then that gives you something to work towards. It helps keep you motivated, and it'll help keep you feeling like you've got direction rather than feeling lost. So in the end, because I was enjoying my current role and current employer, I just kind of took the pressure off myself a bit and just thought that it doesn't really matter about making a decision now, really, and I can just continue going on with the role that I've got now. And so that's exactly what I did, and decided to go for, I suppose, climbing the ladder, if you want to call it that term, with my current employer. And so I've done that twice since qualifying. So when I qualified, I was at consultant level. Shortly after qualifying, I became assistant manager, and then 18 months after that, I became manager. So it went well for me just knowing that I could stay with my current employer and climb up the ladder there, and I could set goals and objectives that would allow me to do that, and that helped give me that direction and motivation and stop me feeling lost. So it was great to know that I could do that. Once I did that, I felt much better. I can't really stress enough how important I personally think it is to have these goals and objectives to help keep you on the track and not feeling lost. So if you've never done this before, I can highly suggest giving this a go. And I'm just going to talk a bit now about how you can go about doing this, I suppose. Setting these targets, setting these goals, thinking about what you need to do next. The first step really is, particularly if you have a certain job in mind that you want in the future, is to think about exactly what skills it is that you need and what experiences you need in able to obtain and get that job that you're working towards. If you don't have a specific job that you're working towards, then you can maybe pick one so that you can set goals and objectives that would help you to get there, even if you decide to change your mind later, because as we talked about, skills are very transferable anyway. Or you can just think about more goals and objectives that are a bit more generic. You can do some self-reflection to think about the current skills that you have, which ones are strong, which ones you might need to work on, and which ones are going to be the most important to work on and improve. Because if, say, you wanted to become a partner, I know I seem to keep using this as an example, but it's just such an easy one that comes to mind. You're going to need strong business development and sales skills, because that is an important part of being a partner, along with leadership skills. If you wanted to become a manager and that's where you wanted to be for the rest of your career, then you could work on making sure you've got strong managerial skills, particularly around, say, delegating work, people skills in terms of managing, say, junior people and helping them to become better and supported, etc. So there's kind of loads of different skills that you could decide to develop and improve on. And you can kind of see there how having an idea about what job it is that you're aiming for or where you want to be as an end goal will help you to choose the right skills to focus your energy on, or the more ones where you'll get, I suppose, better time investment from working on those. So after you've self-reflected and you've thought about what skills that you need to improve on and get better at, and kind of comparing where you are now to where you need to be, you can then think about actually setting some goals and objectives and the areas that you want to work in. So let's say in the future you wanted to become a tax lecturer and that was your end goal. Then maybe your objectives could be set around becoming good at public speaking, talking in front of a crowd, and maybe even techniques on how to clearly convey information to help people to learn it and understand it. If you wanted to become a tax partner, then you could think about maybe setting some objectives around becoming better at developing business and winning more work and clients, etc. And this is kind of where knowing how good you currently are at that skill comes into use and becomes handy, because if you're already very good at one of these skills that you need for this particular job, then you might not need to develop it much, and so your objective could be different. But if it's say an area where you don't really have any experience and you feel like it's a skill that you're not very strong at, then you can put a lot of effort and time into developing and improving that skill. I have already touched upon this a little bit already, but it's just worth remembering that a lot of the skills that you will learn are transferable in kind of the tax career space. So a lot of skills can be developed and improved, and they will be important and useful for many tax jobs. So some of these areas, for example, could be technical ability or knowledge. I think these are like absolute musts for anyone. So whatever effort and whatever time you put into working on those will definitely pay off. Relationship building, which I think is massively important, regardless of, say, if you're going to be working in-house or in practice. Because if you're in-house, you need to be able to build relationships with your team and maybe stakeholders and the senior team or the CEO, etc. Whereas if you work for a tax practice instead, then building relationships with your immediate team and, say, clients or potential clients, etc. will be important. There's loads of skills like this throughout tax, and even though some skills may need developing more for certain roles or less in certain roles, the time you spend on developing and working on these skills will not be wasted. When it comes to setting your goals, etc., I would start with a high-level objective, something like improve business development, sales skills, or talking in front of an audience, and then really kind of dig down deep to get something really specific and more tangible. And to do that, I do suggest using SMART objectives, and I think there's probably a bit of stigma around SMART objectives being pointless or too much hassle to create than they're worth, but from my experience, if you get them right, they can be invaluable because they become so easy to follow and it's so easy to know once you've hit them. So for those of you that don't know what a SMART objective is, SMART is an acronym that basically stands for specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound. Just as an example then, the kind of high level objective could be that you want to improve your tax technical ability and technical skills. So then to be more specific, you could think about, well, what area is it that you want to improve on in relation to your technical ability? Do you want to become better at using HMRC guidance? Do you want to become better at using legislation? Would you like to be able to understand more about case law? Whatever it is, you can become more specific than just wanting to improve your technical ability. So then once you've become more specific, and let's say you've chosen that you want to become better at using legislation and be more comfortable with using it, your measure could be to have been able to find the relevant pieces of legislation in relation to 3 tax queries that you've had in order to get the right answer. It could be that you want to know what the relevant acts are for the area of tax that you work in, or it could be that you want to know what the relevant regulations are as well. So then your measure could be to know, say, the top 3 acts and regulations, and then know how to locate them within, say, the Tolley's yellow or orange handbooks, for example. That could be the measure. Once you've got the measure, you can then think about what the action is. So let's say that you want to know what all the relevant acts are, then the action could be to go and find out what the relevant acts are, and that could be by speaking to colleagues, it could be by looking online by Google, it could be by asking a tutor if you're still studying towards a qualification. Whatever it is, you can then decide what the action is so that you can do it. Once you've kind of done those 3 points, you can think about whether or not it's a realistic goal. So is it actually going to be achievable to do that, particularly in relation to the timescale that you set yourself in order to do that? So if you set yourself a 3-month timescale to figure out what all the relevant acts are in relation to the area of tax that you work in, is that realistic or not? And then once you've gotten the SMART objective, that's it, and you can kind of just repeat that process over and over again. And with that example, that might have made it sound easy to come up with that SMART objective, but I can tell you now that it just took me probably 10-15 minutes to start with that high level objective and then kind of break it down into those sections so that you can make it specific, measurable, actionable, realistic and time bound. But for me, it's definitely worth the time because you clearly know when you've met that objective and you'll be able to see the progress and you will know that you are improving. So I'll go into a lot more detail about how to self-reflect, decide on what your relevant goals and objectives are, and then turning them into SMART objectives in my free email course, which can be found at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com. There will be a link in the show notes to this episode, which will be at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP20. And the course is basically designed to help you to progress and develop your career at a pace that is set by you. And there is a specific day within that course that works on kind of honest, truthful self-reflection in relation to your skills and experiences. There's also a day on establishing the skills, experiences, qualifications that you need in order to obtain and get that target job that you want. And there is also a day which is all about setting your objectives and goals and making them SMART. Most of the days are pretty much step by step, so it will make doing all of these things much easier. So if you'd like to have a look at that, you can go on over to the website and sign up to the free email course. I'm just going to touch upon now whether you should actually do any further qualifications. So let's say you're ATT qualified. Do you want to become CTA qualified? Should you become CTA qualified? If you're CTA qualified, should you think about doing the Advanced Diploma in International Taxation or the ACA qualification, or in any order of these? So once you've already got a qualification, should you do any more? I think this is a question that probably a lot of people have, and there's not necessarily a black and white right answer to this. So for me personally, after becoming CTA qualified, I was actually considering doing either the ACA or the Advanced Diploma in International Taxation qualifications because I thought that would be an easy way to give myself direction, give myself something next to focus on. But really, was it going to be beneficial for me to do those qualifications with me working in employment tax? And I think that's the important question to ask, really. Is it going to be beneficial for you to actually do that qualification? Because for me, working in employment tax and not having any intention to move into any other area of tax, it probably wasn't going to be that beneficial to me. Would it have been beneficial? Yes. Would it have been the best use of my time though? And could I be doing something more beneficial with my time? And I thought the answer to that personally was yes. So could you, for example, be going on some courses to improve, say, a soft skill instead, rather than spending all that time on the professional qualification? The answer might be yes, it might be no. Could you do some volunteering, say, for an ATT or a CIOT group? That could be a good use of your time to get experience and learn some skills by being hands-on. Would it be a good idea to get a book in relation to some of the skills that you're working on or want to get better at? So I do think it's worth having a think about what would be the most beneficial thing for you to do after already having one qualification. And if the answer to that is doing another qualification, then great, by all means do it. For me personally, I thought it was better to spend my time elsewhere after becoming CTA qualified rather than doing another professional qualification. And quite frankly, at that time, I'd come out of doing a maths degree at university. I then went straight into doing the ATT qualification and then straight on to doing the CTA qualification. I did not want to do any more exams at that point, really. Who knows, that might change in the future and I might change my mind, but for me right now, it's not the right answer, and I think that will be the case for many people. And whilst we're on this kind of debate about whether you should do any further qualifications or not, I just want to touch upon whether it's okay to stop at the ATT qualification or whether it's kind of essential or recommended to go on and do the CTA qualification as well, for example. Because I personally toyed with this a bit because I really was kind of getting to the point where I didn't want to do exams anymore. I was kind of thinking, is the CTA going to be essential? Is it going to help me in the future? And do I really need to do it? And it is not essential to do the CTA. I think that's probably obvious, but what having the CTA does, or the ACA as an equivalent for that, is it does open up a lot of doors in terms of being able to get other jobs. So if you've got a particular job in mind and they sometimes ask for, say, the CTA or the ACA qualification, then I think you should probably do that. But saying that, there's plenty of jobs out there that do not require the CTA qualification, and that's the case a lot in employment taxes in particular. But for me, I just wanted to have those opportunities later down the road and not kind of, I suppose, reduce the amount of chances or the opportunities in terms of different jobs to have in the future. So for me, I wanted to do it. And actually, after doing the CTA qualification anyway, it was a super proud moment for me. And I'm sure it would be the same for you if you decide to do that. So I suppose just to recap, there's no need to do further qualifications. It might be beneficial for you. It might not be. Have a think about where your time could be best spent. And there is no need to do the CTA or equivalent level qualification, such as the ACA. But you might want to, so that it opens up those extra opportunities later on down the road and gives you that opportunity to learn more knowledge and more skills. Just going to give some, I suppose, closing thoughts and tips really to help you to continue progressing and developing your career straight after qualifying, because I do know that it can be quite a daunting time and it can seem like you've just come out of doing all these difficult and time-consuming qualifications and then not really knowing exactly what you're going to do with it next. And as I've said a couple of times in this episode, it is okay to not know exactly what you want. I think very few people probably do know that, and if they say they do, they're probably not telling you the full truth. And it's also okay to take it easy for a while, I suppose. You have just come out of doing potentially 2-3 years of professional qualifications, maybe straight after university. So you might just want a bit of a break and to say enjoy the finer things in life for a while. So it's not necessarily a race to the top, even if that is something that you want long term. You haven't got to get there quickly. You can take a bit of a break and then get onto the path towards progressing and developing again later. At some point, it is completely your choice, and there is no right or wrong answer in relation to this. It's also worth just knowing that you are actually the only person who is responsible for your own career. And I know there are times and cases where you might feel like, say, your employer should be in part at least responsible for that. But if you just realise that you are the one responsible and you take control of that yourself, you will get yourself into the position that you want to be much easier and quicker than you would do if you left it in someone else's hands. I think you should also seize any opportunities that come your way, as long as they are in line with what you want out of your career. So a lot of people just say take all the opportunities that come your way, and I personally don't agree with that, not in all cases. I think seize an opportunity that is good for you. Do not take the ones that are not a good use of your time. Focus your time on the areas where you will get the most benefit. That's my main tip on that one, really. And as well as seizing opportunities, can you create your own? And if there are the possibilities for that, you can go out and create your own opportunities. I think you should also take pride in absolutely all the work that you do, because that's a way that you can show that you're a valuable member of staff or a valuable advisor, whoever it's for. If you take pride in the work that you do, then I think the good opportunities will come your way more naturally. So never try and do a rush job. Always try and put your 100% into everything that you do in relation to work and your career. And I do think good opportunities will come your way more naturally if you do that. Do not underestimate the importance of relationships. Whatever job it is that you're going to have in the future, building a good network of people that you like and get along with, and you build strong relationships with, they can always pay dividends in the future, and they can go in both ways. So your relationship with someone else could benefit them, and the relationship could also benefit you. Also, a closing thought and tip really is that I think a lot of people underrate productivity and working efficiently. I do think in the UK in particular, there is kind of a lot of focus put on working long hours, and that's seen as a good thing sometimes when it comes to wanting to become promoted or developing and progressing your career. But for me personally, I think the better thing to do is to become as productive and as efficient as you possibly can and get more work done in a shorter amount of time. Obviously, of course, not losing any of the quality of it by doing that. And if you can be more productive and do things more quickly, then you will get yourself a better work-life balance. And I truly believe that that will then prevent you getting burnout later down the road. So I would always try and be as productive as possible. There's plenty of resources out there about productivity, and it's probably just about finding the right thing for you. There is actually an episode of the podcast that's based around productivity, and although you might not think that having an effective to-do list is going to be helpful when it comes to productivity, it's something that has massively boosted mine and other people as well. So if you're interested, you can always go and take a look at that episode of the podcast as well. There will be a link in the show notes. And my last closing thought and tip is to just embrace continuous learning. Tax is a really good career, I think, for mental stimulation and for the opportunity to continuously learn, whether that's new legislation, new rules, new skills. I think there's so much that you can get out of it. And if you want to keep progressing and developing and enjoying your career, I do think you really need to embrace a journey of continuous learning, and particularly doing that in areas that are going to be important in getting you to where you want to be. Just in summary for this episode then, so it's just knowing that it can be a tough time after qualifying, but you can get over that hurdle by having a think about exactly what you want out of your career, particularly in relation to values and goals. You can then think about the direction that you want to go in and make sure that they align with those career values and goals. You can then establish goals and objectives to help you get to where you want to be in relation to the direction, career values, goals, etc. And if it's something that you're thinking about, you could, if you want to, take further qualifications, but just think about whether or not that is necessarily the best choice for you right now, and think about whether there are any different options instead. And then I suppose the last point is to take action in relation to all of those things. It's great knowing that you can do these things, but if you don't take action, then it's, in my opinion, pointless you knowing the knowledge and being able to do it. If you are interested in continuing to progress and develop your tax career, then I can recommend you take a look at my free email course, which is available through the website. And there are specific days within this course that work on some of the things we talked about in this episode, which is establishing the skills and experiences you need for the job that you want, being able to self-reflect in an honest and truthful way, and also then setting and deciding on the goals that you need and making them smart. You can sign up to the course by heading on over to the show notes for this episode, which can be found at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP20. That's thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP20, and TTPP20 just stands for the Tax Professionals Podcast episode 20. If you've enjoyed this episode, you can also subscribe to the podcast either via the podcast app that you use, or you can sign up for email notifications by heading on over to the website at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/subscribe. And each time an episode comes out, you will get an email letting you know about the episodes and a bit of detail about what's included in it. And that will make sure that you don't miss any episodes that are going to be relevant and useful for you personally. But that's it for this episode. Hope that you have found the episode useful and have taken away some useful points that you can use to help improve and develop your tax career. Until next time.